Hey cats, it's Ed Molten Bud here. I've received loads of requests from the viewers to compare this shoe, the ADIDAS PRIME X 2.0 Strung, up against a boatload of other options. So today we compare this mammoth midsole up against the Boston 12 from Adidas, the Alphafly 2 from Nike, and the most requested comparison, the Superblast from Asics. Let's get into it. Okay people, I got 3 shoes up against this mammoth monolith midsole. I've got one that's a tiny bit more expensive than this one, plus a couple that come in quite a bit cheaper. First up, we got the Boston 12 from Adidas. I have to say, the Boston 12 does feature a very similar forefoot and heel width, though there is a clear 60-gram difference between the two shoes. I do recall the Boston 10 being very close in weight to what we have in the Prime X2, but the Boston 12 is a very different beast. It comes in much lighter. I think that goes to show just how much the Boston model has changed over the last couple of years. It's kind of odd to think that the Prime X2 makes the Boston 12 feel like a daily trainer, despite the very large midsole stack we have here. I got about 41mm in my pair of the shoes, compared to about 54 or something in this one. I mean, this makes any shoe look small, really. I think it's a bit mad to say that we're calling this a daily use shoe now, but that is the way that running shoes seem to be going right now in 2023. I mean, there is the odd exception, but practically everything's maxed out or it's got Pro at the end of it. In terms of on-foot feel, I'm finding both of these models are a little bit more aggressive feeling, really. They're more responsive in terms of the ride that they offer. I've been a little bit perplexed by some of the comments that I've received about this shoe. I wouldn't suggest it's a marshmallow by any stretch. It's more resilient than squashy. There's more bounce to it than anything. I mean, the avert squash that you get in the Invincible Run 3 isn't anywhere near what you get in this Adidas shoe. I have to say the actual feel of the shoe is changing. I've got about 30 odd miles into it now. Really does feel quite different to when I first put it on foot. I actually think that the Boston 12 and the Prime X2 almost complement each other, really. You could use them in some sort of shoe rotation. I think with the Boston being a little bit lighter, you could actually use it for racing and then doing loads of training in the Prime X2, perhaps if you were doing a marathon. I know that's not what you expect me to say, but that's how it feels now. I'm not really sure this one gives an approximation of what you get in the ADIDAS Pro 3. It does certainly feel a little bit more like the Boston. I've done a longer run in this shoe now. I will update you on that tomorrow. I think it will fit into that longer run type category now. It is a heavier beast than the Prime X original. More a training option, I suppose, now. At least the waters aren't muddied anymore as to whether this model is really a race option. You could argue now that the upper on the Boston is by far more refined in terms of the lockdown, and its sort of presence on foot isn't quite as odd as the Prime X2. It's a glove-like fit, really, compared to that strung upper that we got on the Prime X. I think it's sort of slightly confused, really, in the way that they've used it in this version of the shoe. Though the underfoot bounce of that model is quite intoxicating, really, and it's improving over the miles. So I think it's a bit less of which one you should have, rather than maybe you could actually get both of these and put them together to create a really good rotation. Just feels like they complement each other in terms of what they do these days. They just seem to fit really well, like two puzzle pieces. Next up, comparing the Prime X2 up against the Asics Superblast. Now, this one has been requested countless times by the viewers out there. There's a lot of fans of this shoe, and they want to know how it shapes up against the new Adidas model. Many people are telling me that the Superblast is a million times better, and it just is far more versatile, and I gotta be honest, I think they're right. Though I think they're very different shoes actually when you get them on foot. The Adidas upper here is more of a container, really, rather than wrapping the midsole around your foot. Much thinner material on the Superblast, and in hand, you know, they're drastically different. This one's much easier to get on foot and actually tighten up and achieve a good lockdown. The Asics shoe's certainly more traditional. This one takes a little bit of working out to actually understand where you need to get the lace tension to actually get the best fit. I think the Superblast is a shoe that kind of looks like it could be very tall and unstable, but it's not all that weird actually when you get it on foot. You can't say the same thing about the Prime X2. It is a very odd sort of shoe. Once you start running in the shoe and you figure out how to get the best out of it, it's a really enjoyable experience. You can't get away from the fact though that the Prime X2 has got a hell of a lot more foam underfoot than the Superblast. It's quite an odd sensation really in the Superblast. The foam feels quite brittle when you actually touch it. Underfoot it doesn't have that sort of exhilarating bounce, I suppose, that you get in the Adidas shoe. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's not soft or inviting, but with the Prime X2 and that energy core stuff you've got in the forefoot, it does make you want to make a beeline, I suppose, to actually land on that area. Where I've measured that foam with my Shore Durometer meter, it actually comes up about 19, which is incredibly soft on the Shore A scale. The lower the number, the softer the foam. That really is coming in round about where we'd see fuel cell or something. Where this stuff's actually very bouncy, the stuff that you get in the Asics shoe, which is Flight Foam Turbo, it's a little bit more brittle, I suppose. Not quite so dense. As I mentioned earlier though, you will feel that 70 gram difference in this shoe. You know, over 2 ounces. It can't be ignored. I think over a longer run you're really going to feel that. Going between the two shoes over the last few days, yeah, this one's far less present on foot. And less present in the wallet as well, with it only being £190, so it's £60 less than the Prime X2 Strung. The Adidas shoe though does toast this Superblast in terms of outsole. Way more grip there with the Continental rubber on the Prime X2. This stuff's good, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't have the same grip, especially in wet weather. And it's kind of the same deal really with the Novablast 3. They just need to switch up the pattern here perhaps, rather than the compound, just so it works a bit better on some wet surfaces. So in terms of versatility, I think I've got to give this comparison to the Superblast. It just works over a wider range of paces, just feeling more comfortable and sustainable. I think many of the viewers will agree with me on this one. Last and final comparison is one of the only shoes, in fact, in my collection that actually comes in more expensive than the Prime X2, and that is the Nike Air Zoom Alphafly Next Percent 2. I think I'll just call it the Alphafly 2 from now on in this video. So the Prime X2 does come in somewhat taller in the heel in terms of that midsole stack, which is quite amazing really and hard to get your head around because the Alphafly is such a massive shoe in itself. Though the thing I always wonder about here is where they actually measure this, because I always thought there's a bit more actual stack in the heel of this shoe than they're letting on. They've got this sort of carved out area here. I think somewhere Nike's trying to circumvent the rules. I think the Adidas upper design here is clearly influenced or inspired by the Alphafly 2. I mean, you have to shoehorn yourself into both models, but the Alphafly 2 is that bit easier to get into. The Alphafly 2 is that little bit easier to get into. You've got those big pull tabs here at the rear and on the tongue. I think it's mainly down actually to the elasticated Flyknit material that runs the length of the tongue here. Getting into the Prime X2 Strung is a skill that you have to learn over many years. I think the lace loop arrangement here on the Nike shoe is just much better built for purpose really. The loops and the extra eyelets that we've got here just don't really do that good a job. It just makes the shoe look a little bit unsightly if perhaps you have a narrow to normal width foot. Adidas have tried to use that same sort of knit approach here, but it isn't implemented as well. The original Prime X design was just way better in terms of lockdown. Now the forefoot areas in the midsole of both of these shoes are very exciting. I think that's why everybody's here really, to see those. You do find yourself aiming for those forefoot areas there on foot strike. Both have very extreme sort of bevels to the heels. In fact, the Alphafly 2 is almost like a boat. The massive weight difference here though makes one a racer and one a trainer. In fact, you could train in the Alphafly 2. It's reasonably durable, but this one's out of contention. It's just got too much bulk. Makes the Alphafly 2 easier to hold those sort of more race-like paces over a distance. I mean, this is a great, very forgiving trainer, but let's not forget what Bowerman said. It must be light, comfortable and go the distance. And you certainly can't say that this one's all that light anymore. Now, it's like 2.5 ounces extra per foot to carry around for a marathon. Nobody's going to do that. Yes, the Alphafly 2 is more expensive, but I can't see why anyone's going to spend 250 big ones on a trainer. I mean, the Prime X Strung was one you could race in. It was reasonable in terms of weight, not actually that much more than this one. How Adidas have come up with the price for that new shoe, I don't know. So the Alphafly 2 for me is a better option. Perhaps you can pick one up with a little bit of discount as well. I think you'll just get a lot more value out of it. You better use it in training and racing. That's a good thing. Okay, that's all my comparisons for the moment for the Adidas ADIZERO Prime X 2 Strung. Is that right? Yeah, nice and concise name, that one. Stay tuned for a long run video in this one tomorrow. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on all the shoes in today's video down in the comments. Musical interlude time. I've been listening to a chiptune album, actually by 8-Bit Universe, called Chipped Off. There's some fantastic cover versions here in the sort of 8-bit, I guess, Nintendo style and sound. Bittersweet Symphony is certainly worth checking out, but my absolute favourite is their version of The Darknesses, I Believe in a Thing Called Love. Seem to have cranked up the tempo a little bit on this one. They're not just sort of direct copies of the tracks, they've put their own mark onto them. It's almost turned it into a sort of banging techno style version. Bizarrely, that one works the best really out of all of the tracks they've selected on the album. The guitar solos are particularly well reconstructed. Surfing USA as well is pretty good by the Beach Boys. Some slightly more distinct drums in there, but you've got that rock and roll feel somehow, but in an 8-bit style. Go and check it out, people. 8-Bit Universe with Chipped Off. Thank you for tuning in. It's always appreciated. Make sure you don't forget to vote for Pedro, hit that subscribe button, and give this video a thumbs up like. It really does help. My name's Eddbud, and I'll be seeing you